Get this started, man. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Life of a Champ podcast. For today's episode 251, we're going to be discussing this concept called no more, no less. And first, if you do not know who I am, my name is Champ, and I help men win. I'll be helping them win, and I'll be helping you win by giving you some information like this today that will hopefully be a little bit more insightful than the typical content that you do watch. So, first thing I want to start the podcast with is this. You must understand, and this is something that I've came to the conclusion of, and maybe you're going through the same type of struggle, and of course I was there once myself. I observably see, through years and years of my own personal development, I see clearly that a lot of people haven't necessarily asked themselves the questions that they need to be asking themselves. They don't really know themselves. Most people my age, anywhere from about, let's just say legit probably about 15 to, let's just say 25, right? Obviously, this is a very, very big age group, very, very important age group, and yet, for whatever reason, we have the most amount of knowledge and the most amount of information, and we know the least amount what to do with that type of information, which I think is very, very interesting. It is so easy for you to get caught up in the day-to-day life, for you to get caught up in entertainment, for you to get caught up in things that don't really matter, and then some years go by, and then you wonder where the time went. And I just find this very, very interesting because when you start getting into the next steps of life, as I'm getting into, as many people around my age are also getting into, it seems as if we don't know enough about ourselves to be able to make a very firm decision, for us to be able to make clear and concise decisions that maybe generations previous had made so easily, right? Or maybe they knew a little bit more about themselves, or maybe they spent a little bit more time with themselves, right? And I've clearly observed this, and I can only observe this thoroughly just because of the simple fact that I had went through it myself, is I understand thoroughly that most people do not have a season of introspection. And what I mean by that is they don't have a period of time where they actually can ask these questions. They actually start to evaluate and start to weigh up what they value and start to go through the things that are the processing that everyone needs to go through, especially at this young of an age, as you have so much potential, you have so much, kind of going for you because you have time. And it just seems more and more the case that most people around these ages really don't know who they are, what they want to do, and why they want to do what they want to do, or even how to do what they want to do, which is even more important. So hopefully I'll be asking you some questions to make this a little bit more clear for you. And um, there's going to be many things that kind of go into this with the introspection, and I can give you my own story, right? So I've had plenty of times, and I'd say let's just say I'll give you this one story. So I was a little bit out of high school, and I had spent a lot of money on the setup that I currently have in order to try to seek out introspection, to try to pursue my purpose, and to pursue the route that I wanted to choose, right? Which was to build a personal brand online. I seen there was a trend of people building personal brands around this time, and I thought it was very, very important for me to also do that because I think this is a thing of the future. It doesn't take that much of a genius to be able to recognize that, right? There's a lot of people living a current lifestyle with this that looks a little bit more intriguing, and obviously it looks a little bit better than, quite frankly, what everybody else has been doing for plenty of generations, which is just working and trading their time for money, right? I wanted something more than that, and the only way that I decided that was going to be the case was if I had developed a personal brand, right? But in order to come to that conclusion, I needed some time to be able to develop my ideas, right? So I had spent about an 11th month period, almost an entire year, without a job, and thankful to my parents, they allowed me to go ahead and do this, right? Maybe you can allow this for yourself, maybe you can't. But nonetheless, it was one of the most transformative periods of my entire life, right? And I'm only saying that because, of course, I messed around just like any kid my age. But in the same breath, I also took a lot more intentional action. I had built up plenty of habits. I had got rid of plenty of habits, and that was the foundation of what allowed me to be a lot more introspective, right? From there, moving into this season of life, getting around certain people, I was able to clearly almost divide myself from the crowd. And this is what people don't do enough. They don't really have these periods of time in their life where they're able to divide themselves from the crowd. They start to do, and I was a victim of this as well, right? Up until that point. I start to do and to not think as much about what I want to do and start to do what everyone else wants to do, right? And I know that's kind of hypocritical because of what I mentioned a little bit earlier, but nonetheless, I still think it's the right decision. But when people don't have this period of time or they don't make this time, right? Or let's just say, for example, right, the alternative that I had in that scenario was, let's just say I were to work a job, right? I work a job, I put in 40 hours a week, put in 5 days, 8 hours, 40 hours a week for the next, let's just say it was 11 months, right? That time is very, very valuable. Very, very valuable. And of course, living without money is obviously less than ideal and quite frankly not manageable or not even sustainable for most people, which I can understand as well. But nonetheless, if you're able to find a period, especially in this, I'm gonna say 25 and under, right? If you have saved enough money and you're living and your living situations aren't too much of an extension, right, or too much extended outside of you. Let's just say you live with your parents. Let's say you live with let's just say a roommate or something like that. You live in a dorm or whatever, right? I highly recommend to put away the the goofing off. You can do that anytime in your life, right? Especially at a young age, you can do that anytime, right? But just take some time and set some time aside for you and yourself, right? I see it all too often within my friends, right? Within the group that I have, I can see who's taken the time, who's dedicated the time, who is actually allowed themselves to develop, who's actually asked themselves the question, who's actually, had that introspective moments where they recognize and try to be able to distinguish, is this good for me or is this bad for me? What do I want? Who am I? What am I trying to attain in this life? What lifestyle do I want to live? Right? Those are all very, very important questions to ask. And like I said, if you do not ask these questions, the result of your life is going to be completely different than what you want. And that's the thing with most people is they don't ask these questions. Maybe they have a very, very blurry vision of what they want, but yet they don't actually have any plan in order to try to get exactly what they want. Or they don't have or aren't taking the steps that are necessary in order to get them where they want to go, right? And I'm not going to sit on here. I'm not going to sit here and say I know the exact steps to get you exactly where you want to go. But what I will tell you is, number one, I can tell you exactly how to not get there, is by not asking yourself these questions that I will ask here in a minute. And on top of that, if you also don't give yourself some of these times, like I said, it's going to be much harder, right? And I'll say it like this, right? So let's go back to the example that I had previously talked about, right? I had spent 11 months without working, right? I dedicated that to myself, right? Along with goofing off and things like that. And like I said, I'm not going to say I didn't do that. I was completely 100% locked in monk mode. I'm not going to say that, right? I did have a period of time where I was monk mode, where I was intentionally celibate, where I was all these things for a specific reason, because that's who I wanted to be. That's the character I wanted to develop. That's the story that I wanted to tell, right? And let's just say I didn't do that. Let's just say I had spent, the smaller fractions of time with myself. Probably would have taken me, let's just say, 3 years in order to get where I was mentally in that 11 months, right? Let's just say I feel as if I had developed myself years of development, years of spending time, which, like I said, would have been those fractions of time that I have outside of working, right? Maybe your weekends or maybe the time you get off of work or before work, right? If you give yourself more time, it is almost like a cheat code. Because like I said, everyone else around my age was working. They weren't spending that time and taking that time in order to develop themselves, to ask themselves the most important questions that I value, right? And that is the complete advantage. That is the complete opposite. Maybe they'll be able to come to that conclusion in 3 years, but I did that in 11 months. You see what I'm saying? So that is how you speed up your progression. You speed up your progression through time, right? And of course, in order to get that time, you're going to need money, right? But the thing that people get wrong is they think that time is money, that time equals money, when that's not the case, right? You would think, and this is something that I mention in my personal life all the time, and I mention to my friends all the time, what really moves the needle? In order to get ahead in this life, you need time. More money doesn't exactly equal moving the needle, right? Changing your life, being able to develop the identity, develop the character that is going to be built, right? You need time, you need experience, and you need time. If you're removed from experience and you're having less and less time on your hands in order to gain that experience, or in order for you to ask those questions, you're going to be much much worse off. That's what I'm saying. And I just think for you watching this, if you can afford it, it's going to be within your best interest, 100%. 100%. And like I said, people say, money equals time, time equals money, whatever, whatever, right? But here's the thing. Unless you have a large sum of money where you actually can, not work, then that money is just progressively getting it's essentially you taking a next step on some stairs, right? That's just what it is, right? Yes, there is some progression, but it's a very very slow type of progression, right? So like I said, time doesn't equal money. In order to move the needle, you must have time. If you do not have time, you can't move the needle. If you don't have enough time to think, you cannot move the needle as much. That's what it is, because like I said, you're dedicated and you're focused in something else, right? So for me, for example, right? I'll keep giving these examples because I think they're interesting, right? Any job that I work right now, right, isn't what I want to do for the rest of my life. So in the grand scheme of my entire life, it's really not that important. What is important is if I develop the habits, the character, and the identity that I would like to be like in order to live the life that I want to live. That is the most important. That is paramount. That is paramount when compared to the job experience that I could be getting at when your local whatever the hell, right? You see what I'm saying? So understand that if you're young and you're watching this right now, time is on your side, right? Time is already on your side. But just know that there's experiences out there that you need to experience. You have to experience it in order to develop your character, in order to develop your story, in order to do these things, in order to be the person that you want to be, right? And there's going to be certain situations, like I said, working jobs and things like that, that are going to be taking away from that true experience that you can be having. And it is up to you to be able to, recognize if my living circumstances can't afford it, right? If I can save enough money, I deserve some time to myself to figure some shit out. Because if not, maybe it's going to take you longer in order to get to where you want to go. Maybe you'll never know where you even want to go. Maybe you will always still be in the dark. Maybe that image that was supposed to be more clear is always going to remain blurry for the rest of your time, right? Obviously, that's less than ideal, but that's the very truth. Because at the very least, if you do not take the time, like I mentioned, which moves the needle, you're bound to be in a position where you're either going to have a delayed outcome that might be favorable, or you're going to have a delayed outcome, rather, that isn't favorable at all. That isn't moving the needle. That isn't aligned with your habits. That isn't aligned with the identity that you want to uphold. That isn't aligned with the life that you want to live. And like I said, the answer is up to you. I'm not saying you can't achieve your dreams and do exactly what you want to do unless you have a period of time. But what I am saying is, if you want to get closer to the person that you want to become, you're going to need to have introspection. And you're going to need to have time dedicated to yourself outside of all the bullshit in this world, right? And part of this, like I said, is with experiences, right? And then I'll get into that as well, right? So I believe there's certain things that do shape your reality, right? Obviously, like I said, for me, it was that deep season of introspection. I recognize thoroughly a lot of people, they don't also have certain life events. They don't have big life events that happen in their early life, right? Obviously, sometimes it's a little bit different, of course, but some of those big life events, they do change you, and then that is obviously also very much ideal. It also depends on exactly what it is, but nonetheless, being able to have big life experiences, right? Whether it's really really positive or really really negative, or is going to be ultimately beneficial for you long term, because then you have a story to tell, you have some choices to make, and you have a perspective that's going to be altered and changed, which is good, because that is life, that is experience, that is all these things like I talked about. And so much can be built from those experiences, right? So for some, it's a breakup. For some, it's a loss of a family member. For some, it's whatever, right? Those are just some examples, I guess. But these things mold and build men, right? And to be voided of these, whether it's your own choice to go ahead and personally delay them, or for you to not have them, right? That's very very costly, very very costly. I can't even express it enough, right? And Yes, like I said, I'm not going to say you force yourself upon these situations, but what I'm saying is you need to be able to be in a position where you can hopefully have them. Because if you cannot have them, if you cannot have some of the most essential life experiences that do exist, especially at a young age, then it's going to take you longer to get to where you want to go, right? And I want to kind of reiterate back on the point that I had made a little bit earlier. I had observed, and maybe you can observe this as well, right? I have observed that there's a lot of young people, or like I said, let's just say 15 to 25, that honestly do not know where they're going in life, where they will end up. They don't know who they are. They don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They don't understand what is actually taking away from the life that they want to live. They don't know what they're doing right now that is actually contributing to the life that they want to live. Yet they still want a favorable outcome. That makes no sense to me, right? They get caught into this cycle. And of course, like I said, everyone's a victim of this to an extent, but it's your ability to recognize that you're in the cycle and also to get yourself out of the situation as well, is to recognize that there's a cycle of consume and create, right? That's what it comes down to, right? Everyone's a consumer, right? Everyone's going to consume content. Everyone's going to consume or have their time consumed and their energy consumed with certain things, right? What those things are up to you to an extent, right? Some of these things we are victims of. Not to play the victim card, but honestly, some of these things we are victims of, right? We have billion-dollar corporations that are, strategically made and strategically has set up certain algorithms in order to put us in a perpetual state of suffering, whether we know it or not. Whether that's what you call the good old classic doom scrolling, of course. But here's the thing: the reason why people are farther away from where they want to be, who they want to be, is partially because of that, right? They consume too much and they don't create, right? That is what I believe. If you look at any person that is worth admiring, they created something. They either created a career, they created a business, they created a brand, they created something, a product, something. They created something. So that is what I'm going to really, really stress. If you want to develop your character, if you want to have experiences worth talking about, consume a little bit less or maybe even drastically less, depending on who you are and what your circumstances are, right? Consume less and create more. That can only serve you best, right? So for me, for example, I created this podcast. I'm almost at my 4 year of creating this podcast, 251 episodes, right? The amount of value that I've gotten from creating something, from developing my own mind, from going over and figuring out what my own personal values are, right? Is absolutely priceless. And if I had, let's just say I had never made a podcast and I didn't create and I constantly consumed, it would probably take me in order to be about 26 to 27 in order to get to the position that I'm in right now with the mindset that I have, with all the ideas and all the values that I live by. And like I said, time is valuable. We're young, we have a lot of time, but it also is unwise for you to be wasting time. Obviously unwise. Can you waste time? Yes. But you can't waste mine. That's for damn sure. Right? That's for damn sure. And that, like I said, that's my perspective. And maybe you have a different perspective. Maybe you're willing to waste time. But me personally, I'm not trying to waste time. Right? So even asking simple questions, right? Just to try to get something down, right? Now I would highly recommend writing these down. I'm gonna give you some of the questions that I had been asked or I had asked myself that had truly changed my life. Number one, and this is something that I didn't exactly, how do I want to describe this? It wasn't something I exactly like knew this was going to be the case. I guess it's something that from looking back, right? Asking yourself and constantly trying to figure out who you are, right? Who are you? Who do you want to become? Those questions, for example, right? And for me, one of the most, I would say, tragic events in my life, and also one of the most transformative events that had happened afterwards was, let's just say, my first breakup, right? That was one of the most important life moments for me, because here's the thing: a lot of these things, they break men, right? And of course, that's part of what life is. Life is going through breakups. Life is going through all these things, and seeing who you are on the other end, right? And you begin to learn a lot more about yourself going through those life experiences, because then you know exactly what you can handle, what you can't handle. You know a little bit more about yourself, about what you value, what you want, what you definitely don't want. And those things are priceless. Because like I said, the only way that you get that is through time. And if you do not have enough time, then you get farther away from that clarity, right? So I'm gonna give you another one of the questions that I had asked myself that was, or rather, I did ask myself this question, but somebody else had asked me, and I obviously asked myself that question. But I'm gonna give you a little bit of a story. So right around the time I was 18, I think this was fresh out of high school. I had met this one gentleman. His name was Jerry. He was one of my first mentors. He understood thoroughly that I was on the right track, and that I was building the mind of let's just say a millionaire, right? I was building the mind and the character of a person that would be able to attain great wealth later on in their life, for damn sure, right? At least creating the foundation. And he took me aside and asked me a question one day, and like I said, to this day I will always mention how important that question was, because it made me think for a second. It made me think for actually a long period of time, right? The question that he had asked me was this: what lifestyle do I want to live? What lifestyle do you want to live? That is what he asked me. And okay, first, if that's the first time you've ever asked yourself that question, then I think it would be within your best interest to now start to think, start to clarify, start to write down what this looks like. And of course, I'm not expecting you to have it all figured out and 100% this is exactly what I want, with 100% accuracy, exactly what you want and exactly what you will for the rest of your life want. But at the very least, you want to start to create, and this is what you should do in many mental models in life, is to create a foundation of what you know right now. Start to collect information and gather information, of course, in order to have a stronger foundation of who you are and what you want, right? The only way to get to to the person that you want to be, and the only way in order to get there is to figure out who you are and what you want, right? You gather that information. Of course, like I said, there's going to be plenty of years that will go by, and you might have to go back and say, you know what, I had said that I wanted this. I actually don't really want that much. Or years go by, and you say, you know what, that thing that I had said that I wanted, I still want that, right? But at the very least, this needs to be, like I said, along with many other mental models, something that you constantly revise, right? It shouldn't be something that is so distant away from you, that is so blurry of an image, right? So ask yourself the question: what lifestyle do you want to live? For me, the answer was an extraordinary lifestyle, right? And in order to get there, I viewed that if I wanted to take a conventional path that everyone else is telling me to go down, and I look at the life that they have, and they don't have what I want, they don't have the lifestyle that I truly do want, then how the hell am I ever supposed to get there? So now you're supposed now you want to question your own actions, right? You get more information, you question your actions to see if they align. If they don't align, you obviously need to make some corrections. If they do align, you just need to wait some time. And I'd wanted an extraordinary lifestyle because that is what I feel like I'm deserving of. That is what I feel the work that I had put in is going to be deserving of. And with that being said, it's probably going to look like taking an unconventional path. In order to get unconventional results, you must take an unconventional path. And like I had mentioned, right, if you want an unconventional path, or rather an unconventional result, yet you take a conventional route, it's not going to make that much sense because, like I said, you're just going to get what everyone else got who took that same path, right? So you must ask yourself that question, and maybe you'll come to the same conclusion that I did. Maybe you want something that's truly great, right? And if you want what's great, you must do and be whatever it takes in order to be great. And it obviously isn't as simple as that, right? You must have years and years of, like I said, just figuring it out, defining it for yourself, revising it, curating all the knowledge that you're going through, like I said, with all the information that you're gathering, and hopefully you come to a more clear image. And that, like I said, I keep reiterating that because I think it's very, very important. And I'm not just saying within that one specific question, but I'm saying in many different realms in this life, right? Whether it comes to health, whether it comes to business, whether it comes to whatever, right? It doesn't matter what life category it is, right? You need to constantly be on the quest to go ahead and revise the image that you have in order to get closer to what you want to be. And the thing that I recognized, and I kind of explained this, but I want to sum it up a little bit more, is people have too many logic fails in their aspirations, right? They say, "Oh, I want to be a millionaire." And then you look at them and they're playing video games and not doing anything productive, and they're working a job, and when they get off of their job, they want to go ahead and sleep. They want to go ahead and do nothing productive. They don't want to actually push the needle. They don't actually have any time to go ahead and push the needle anyways. And yet they say they want to be a millionaire. How the hell are you ever going to get there? It doesn't make that much sense. You see what I'm saying? So make sure you don't have logic fails. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm definitely not. But what I will say is a lot of the logic fails that I did once have, I no longer have. And like I said, this is going to be an ongoing process, and you must, you must constantly revise for sure. I'm going to read some of these comments, and then I'll get back into it. You can discover yourself if you can't discover yourself if you're always so distracted. Exactly. That's the issue. That's the issue that I'm running into. That's the issue that a lot of people are running into. Another comment, you have to give yourself the opportunity to face things as well as whether you know it or not. As well. Yeah, 100%. I agree with that, Jade. Appreciate for your comments for sure. But getting back into it, like I said, don't have as much logic fails as you need to, right? Of course, you're always going to come across, and you're always going to be able to rediscover, and you're going to need to be able to constantly curate and some type of logical foundation that is going to get you to where you want to go, for damn sure. But you must understand that there must be a somewhat realistic connection. The connection between who you are and who you want to be. There has to be some type of path. There has to be some type of something. And it's not going to look, and like I said, hopefully it's not filled with a bunch of logic fails, or else you'll never get there, for damn sure. Give me 1 second. So, the ways in which you get there, I'm going to ask you some of the most important questions. And these have helped me become a lot more clear with what I want and who I want to become. And are questions that I can clearly see that most people truly just lack the ability to attain the question, lack the ability to ask the question, and lack the ability to actually have the answer, or at least, like I had mentioned, somewhat of a clear image that's going to give them a better reference for the future, right? The first question, and like I said, I mentioned this on many different podcasts because I think it's so important. What are your interests? Right? Ask yourself, what are your interests? Maybe you have some, maybe you have none. And that's another thing that I've seen all too often, right? People consume so much, they don't create anything at all, and then they have no interests. Their interests are very, very superficial. Their interests are very, very, let's just say even destructive, right? I know some people are interested in, one of their biggest interests is gambling. One of their interests is doom scrolling. One of their interests is, OnlyFans models, right? One of their interests are video games, right? Things that actually don't move the needle at all. And I'm not just here to just shit on video games or shit on any of those things. But what I'm saying is, those are interests. But along with those interests, you must also be able to vet those interests as well, right? Of course, I had plenty of interests growing up where I'm like, oh, well, I'm interested in this. This is really, really fun. I like to do this. But quite frankly, this has no space in my life because it's not going to get me to where I want to go. An imperfect example of this was at 18, I stopped playing video games. One of my favorite video games, I played 2K all the time because it was one of my favorite games. To play with my friends as well. And I had to get rid of that because I understood the people that I admire, the people that I want to be like, the person that I want to become isn't a person that's doing that. And you must ask yourself the question, and maybe that's going to be hard, and maybe it's not. Maybe I'm not expecting you to, make those decisions or be as clear cut and go cold turkey from some of your favorite habits or some of your favorite interests. But what I'm saying is, you must begin to question the things in which you've been doing, and hopefully you come to a conclusion that's going to be a little bit more clear, right? A little bit more decisive and a little bit more clear for sure. So, what are your interests? Another question you must ask: what are important interests to have? Right? So I'll give you a couple of them, the ones that I had viewed, right? Some interests that I believe are very, very important to have. Truth seeking the truth, and getting rid of all the bullshit. That is very, very important interest to have, right? Health-wise, whether it's fitness, whether it's diet, whether it's all those things, that's very, very important. These are things that are happening on the daily and will affect the quality of your life forever. For as long as you live. It's a very important interest to have. What lifestyle do you want to live, right? I know that's not even necessarily an interest, but I guess you could say it can be like an evolved interest, if that makes any sense. Um, and let's just say another interest, being able to take care of yourself, right? Maybe that's an interest some people, clearly don't have, but they need to have, right? What are important interests to have, and go from there, right? Because here's the thing: if you, like I said, if you have interests that aren't important, that's interesting. That is very, very interesting to have. It's very, very questionable for sure. Some other questions that I'm going to ask, and that, like I said, have helped shape my life for damn sure. What skills do you have, right? And maybe you're watching this, maybe you're young, maybe you don't have any skills at all. Then you must ask the question: what skills are interesting, right? What skills do I observe, or what interests do others have that I can constantly say, you know what, that's actually a little bit interesting. You know what, if I could have that skill, or develop my interest in that, I think I'd be better off. Observably speaking, what do you see that other people have that you would like to have yourself? What skills and what interests, right? And with that, you eventually ask yourself the question: what skills do you wish that you had? If you could be leveled up in this life the way that you would like to be leveled up, if you can have the certain skill attributes being leveled up, what skills would be worthy of having? So, if me, for example, one of the most important skills that I observe, and this is something that I'll recommend to anyone, is the skill of being articulate with your speech. To be clear and concise, to exactly speak exactly the way that you would like. If you observe, or at least when I go through my own observations, observe the people that I would like to be like, the one thing that really separates them from most people is their ability to speak. Their ability to speak extemporaneously, and their ability to be open with their ideas. And being able to speak is an extension of thought, and thought is an extension of the time that you put in. And if you don't put in enough time, then your quality of your thoughts are not going to be that good. Or if you're consuming a bunch of bullshit, your quality of thoughts aren't going to be that good. And like I said, if your interests aren't calibrated properly, calibrated for the lifestyle that you want to live, then of course your quality of thoughts, like I had mentioned, are going to follow suit and aren't going to be worth anything. That's just what it is. That's being real. So I'm gonna go over these questions again. What skills do you have? Maybe it's none. Maybe it's some, and maybe you're just not that good. Maybe you need to get better. What skills are interesting? What skills do you wish you had? And how do you develop those skills, right? I had mentioned a little bit earlier how speaking extemporaneously is one of the most important skills that I observed that I would like to have. The way that I went about it is going to be by building a personal brand that's going to be helping people out, while also being able to display it on a live stream podcast. So I'm always working on my speech. I'm doing it weekly. I'm doing it a couple times a week. And hopefully that's going to get me closer to the lifestyle that I want to live, because I'm becoming exactly who I want to be, which is going to be a person who can speak in a very articulate way, who's worked and who's spent hours and plenty of time on what they want and who they want to become, right? So yes, figure out what skills that you wish you had, what skills are interesting, how you're going to develop those skills, what are important skills to have, right? Another one of those questions. And I know they kind of all go hand in hand, but yet it's not always that lateral of thinking for most people. But what are important skills to have? If you observe, okay, maybe in this circumstance, if I had this skill, then it would be very, very important to have this skill, right? And it would be very, very useful if, in 5 years from now, if I was in this position, if I had this skill, it would be much better. My lifestyle would be much better, right? For a quick example. But just don't be one of these people that exist nowadays. Like I said, you're a young guy full of potential, and you don't necessarily have any of your interests, values, skills calibrated for the lifestyle that you want to live in order to answer the questions that you actually have, right? And the thing about this, right? I mean, and I'm gonna mention this as well, right? Taking the time to understand your values, going through experiences so you can weigh up what you value and what you don't value, right? That is invaluable. When I say invaluable, I mean you cannot put a price, you cannot put anything when it comes to trying to figure out those specific values, because not only do they help you now when you define your values, but it also helps you to to have a set value structure to go ahead and to go in any and every situation with the right values in mind, right? So one of the most important things for me, and I'll give you a quick example, is to be a man who's integrous, right? A man of integrity, right? And if I have this value, and now I put myself in a predicament in order to be able to act on that value. If I remind myself that I have that value, that is who I want to be, that is who I want to maintain, and that is who I want to become, it's going to be much easier to make that decision, the right decision, more importantly. But here's the thing. If I don't have that clearly defined, if I never took that time, like I had mentioned, it's going to be much harder, and it's going to be much easier for you to make the wrong decision. It's just as simple as that. So that is why it's that important to ask yourself these questions. That is why it's important for you to actually have the time in order to be able to ask the questions that are going to not only help you in the present, it'll help you better understand the past, and it'll also help you better understand and better approach the future. Very, very important. You can't. It's like I said, it's invaluable when you ask yourself these questions. And at the end of the day, if you want to be a man that is actually worth anything in this world, I'm gonna reiterate this. I've never heard this before, and hopefully, this is your first time hearing this as well as my first time saying this. To be truth maxing, very, very important. To do any and everything that you can in order to get closer to the truth, very, very important. Like I said, invaluable. You should be trying your best to get closer to the truth. Whatever that looks like for you, maybe it's the truth about your life, maybe it's the truth about the world. Those are the things that are going to help change your life and move the needle, like I had mentioned. So don't get distracted. Put away your childish ways. And I'm not saying you need to do this exactly now and go cold turkey right now, but what I'm saying is you need to have these things in mind. You need to now have this judgment going forth with your certain habits. And like I said, weigh it up. Does it make sense? Is it going to be aligned to the future that I want to live? Is it going to be aligned to the person that I want to be? Is it going to be aligned with the values that I have set for myself or not? And if it's a no, then you should be doing what I expect everyone to be doing, which, like I said, unfortunately, everyone's not doing it, is to be properly and constantly trying to get clearer, back to that clearer image, right? That I mentioned a little bit earlier that, like I said, most people have that very, very blurry image, but get closer to being able to clear up that image for yourself. Very, very important, man. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off here in a second. If you have any comments, they'll be much more appreciated if you leave them in the comment section. Other than that, do I have anything else that I want to say? You need more experiences. You need more time. Obviously, you need money, but money is only good if you can't afford yourselves more time. The problem is with most people is they have money or they have constant source of money, but they have no time. And in theory, you would think, oh, more money equals more time. Not the case. Not the case at all. Time is much more valuable than money. I will always say that for the rest of time because it's true. You can always spend a lot of money. You can't always, and it is not always worth for you to spend a lot of time on certain things, of course. But other than that, this is all I have to say for today's episode. If you enjoyed, make sure you go and follow me on Twitch, TikTok, Rumble, Spotify, Kick, at Life of a Champ Podcast on every single platform. And other than that, I'll leave you guys off with the podcast motto. Welcome to the winning team. Tap with the next podcast that's going to be on Thursday. This was episode 251 of the Life of a Champ Podcast, talking about no more, no less. And tapping with the next live stream that I'm going to be doing Monday. Next podcast is on Thursday, and other than that, like I mentioned, welcome to the winning team. If you want more one-on-one content, or if you want to work with me specifically, right, or if you want to do a coaching call, that is all going to be available in my school community that I had just recently started up. If there's any courses or anything that you think that would be valuable for me to speak on, make sure you leave in the comments, or, like I said, join the school community and tap in with that for sure. But other than that, y'all have a good night. Like I said, tap in with the next podcast on Thursday, and stay winning, bro.